Everyone remembers Lost in Space as a bright, family-friendly adventure. But what if the truth behind the scenes was nothing like the world fans saw on screen? Beneath the shiny sets and cheerful tone, the cast faced moments that were never meant to be revealed. And once you hear what really happened, the show will never feel the same again. 1. The original pilot concept, what the show was meant to be, before network changes. Before Lost in Space became the bright, family-friendly adventure millions remember, the original pilot carried a completely different energy, one far darker, colder, and closer to a survival thriller than a playful sci-fi. Early drafts showed a stranded family facing isolation, psychological pressure, and genuinely threatening alien encounters, without the lighthearted tone the network later demanded. The Robinsons weren't meant to exchange calm smiles or comedic banter. They were written as a family on the edge, forced to question every decision as they drifted deeper into the unknown. Even Dr. Smith wasn't part of the first pilot, making the story more focused, serious, and terrifyingly realistic. But when CBS reviewed the concept, they feared it was too intense for primetime viewers. They wanted optimism, color, and approachable characters. So the darker ideas were softened, rewritten, or erased entirely, reshaping the show into something far different from its original vision. 2. A major tone shift, the early dark vision of the characters that got softened. In the earliest concept of Lost in Space, the characters were shaped with a seriousness that would have given the series an entirely different legacy. The Robinson family wasn't originally designed as the calm, composed unit viewers later embraced. They were meant to reflect the raw fear and uncertainty of being stranded in the unknown. Each personality carried sharper edges. Doubt, frustration, and emotional strain were part of their daily survival. Even supporting characters were written with a heavier tone, showing how isolation could slowly change people. But once CBS reviewed these early drafts, executives worried the darker mood might make the show too unsettling for families watching together. They pushed for a gentler atmosphere, warmer interactions, and simpler conflicts. This shift softened the characters dramatically, transforming them from complex survivors into friendlier, more predictable figures, and forever altering the series from a tense sci-fi drama into a lighter, more accessible adventure. 3. The character of Dr. Smith's transformation from ruthless saboteur to comic relief. Dr. Smith's evolution is one of the most dramatic shifts in Lost in Space. In the earliest drafts, he wasn't the whining, comedic troublemaker fans eventually adored. He was a genuine threat. Originally written as a cold, calculating saboteur, Smith's mission placed the entire Robinson family in danger by design. His personality leaned toward manipulation, concealed motives, and a level of ruthlessness that felt more suited to a psychological thriller than a family show. But after the first episodes, CBS grew concerned that a villain this severe might overwhelm younger viewers. Jonathan Harris sensed that the network could remove the character entirely if he stayed too dark, so he began altering Smith from the inside out. He added humor, exaggerated reactions, and harmless cowardice. Over time, the sinister operative became a quirky, unpredictable character whose charm overshadowed his original menace, reshaping both the role and the tone of the entire series. 4. The dangerous working conditions hidden behind the show's polished exterior. While Lost in Space appeared bright, colorful, and harmless on television, the cast often worked under conditions that were anything but safe. Many of the elaborate sets were built quickly and cheaply, leaving platforms unstable, props heavier than expected, and stunt areas lacking proper protection. Actors frequently performed scenes involving machinery, smoke effects, or sudden drops without trained coordinators supervising them. Studio lights were so hot that performers sometimes stepped away with minor burns or dizziness, yet filming continued with little concern for recovery time. Even routine moments, walking across uneven ground or exiting the Jupiter 2 mock-up, carried risks the audience never imagined. At a time when safety standards were far looser than today, the cast learned to push through bruises, exhaustion, and the constant fear of slipping or falling. The show looked futuristic on screen, but behind the cameras, the dangers were surprisingly real. 5. Child actor's schedule and the hidden strain behind Will Robinson's bright smile. Behind Will Robinson's cheerful energy, the reality for young Billy Mooney was far more demanding than viewers ever realized. As one of the central faces of Lost in Space, he was needed in scene after scene, often for long stretches that went well beyond what a child should endure. His days blended acting, studying, and repeated retakes, leaving almost no moment for genuine rest. When filming ran late, on-set schooling was pushed aside, and Billy was expected to stay alert, even when exhaustion blurred his focus. Studio officials wanted to keep the production moving, and because he was a child, many assumed he could simply bounce back. Instead, he worked hours that would raise serious concerns today, all while carrying the emotional weight of performing under pressure. Fans saw an adventurous boy exploring alien worlds. They never saw the fatigue, discipline, and quiet resilience that kept him standing. 6. The robot suit actor's ordeal. Heat, weight, and the hidden toll of bringing the machine to life. For viewers, the robot in Lost in Space was charming, iconic, and unforgettable. But for Bob May, the man trapped inside the towering suit, it was a daily battle for endurance. The costume was incredibly heavy, built from rigid materials that offered almost no flexibility or ventilation. Under the blazing studio lights, temperatures inside the suit rose to suffocating levels, leaving Bob drenched in sweat within minutes. Visibility was limited to narrow slits, making even simple movements risky and exhausting. Each scene demanded absolute stillness or controlled motions, even when dizziness or dehydration hit suddenly. Removing the suit took time, so Bob often had to stay inside far longer than any safe standard would allow. Audiences saw a futuristic machine warning, "Danger, Will Robinson," but they never saw the strain, the overheating, and the sheer physical sacrifice required to bring that beloved character to life. 7. The cast chemistry that was restricted before it could fully develop. Although fans sensed a natural connection between certain characters, the cast's on-screen chemistry was often limited by strict network rules. Early in production, several actors felt their interactions evolving organically, especially in moments where emotional tension or subtle affection could have deepened the story. But CBS worried that anything too warm or suggestive might conflict with the show's family-friendly image. As a result, simple gestures like holding hands, comforting touches, or lingering eye contact were discouraged or outright prohibited. Some cast members later revealed that directions frequently included reminders to keep your distance or avoid looking too close, which prevented relationships from developing naturally. These restrictions didn't just change individual scenes, they reshaped the tone of the entire series. What could have been layered, human connections instead became carefully controlled exchanges, leaving viewers with glimpses of chemistry that never had the chance to fully bloom. 8. The network's tight control and the restrictions the cast later described. As the show gained popularity, the cast began noticing a growing layer of control surrounding their public appearances and personal opinions. According to later interviews, the network worried that any comments about weak scripts, tiring schedules, or behind-the-scenes tension might damage the show's friendly reputation. As a result, actors were encouraged to avoid discussing anything that could be interpreted as criticism. Public interviews were screened in advance, and rehearsal conversations were sometimes monitored to ensure no negative remarks slipped out. While these measures were framed as protecting the brand, several cast members later said it created an atmosphere of pressure where speaking freely felt risky. Even harmless jokes about production challenges were discouraged. The intention may have been to maintain a polished image, but the result was a sense of restriction that lingered long after filming ended, shaping how openly the cast felt they could talk about their experiences. 9. The network's fear of darker themes and how it reshaped the entire show. Behind the scenes, CBS constantly monitored the tone of Lost in Space, worried that even small touches of tension or emotional depth might push the show into territory they considered too heavy for families. Early drafts included moments of moral conflict, fear, and darker consequences of survival, but executives frequently requested rewrites to soften anything that felt intense. Even mild scenes suggesting danger were trimmed or lightened with humor to avoid unsettling younger viewers. Creators who wanted to explore deeper storytelling soon realized they had to adjust their vision to match the network's expectations. This tug-of-war shaped almost every episode, turning potentially dramatic arcs into lighter, more predictable adventures. The intention wasn't malicious. CBS simply believed that audiences wanted comfort, not complexity. Still, the result was a show that hid its more mature ideas beneath a polished surface, leaving fans unaware of how much richer and darker the series was originally meant to be. 10. The cast's frustration with shifting focus and promises that were never fulfilled. As Lost in Space progressed, several cast members realized that the show they had been promised was slowly slipping away. Early on, the adults were told they would each have meaningful arcs, strong personal moments, and equal importance within the Robinson family. But as the series evolved, the focus shifted dramatically toward a smaller set of characters, leaving others with shrinking roles and fewer substantial scenes. Some actors described feeling sidelined, watching entire episodes unfold with barely a line of dialogue assigned to them. What made the situation harder was the lack of communication. Changes were made quietly, with no explanation for why certain characters were being reduced. While no one wanted to disrupt the production, the disappointment was real. The cast maintained professionalism, but many later admitted they felt their talents were underused, and the series they joined wasn't the same one they ended up performing in. 11. The unused and destroyed footage that revealed a version of the show fans never saw. Throughout the production of Lost in Space, several scenes were filmed with tones or ideas that ultimately conflicted with the network's vision. Some sequences were considered too intense, too emotional, or too suggestive for the family-friendly image CBS insisted on maintaining. As a result, entire reels were removed during editing, with a few being permanently discarded to prevent misunderstandings or controversy. Actors later recalled moments they believed added depth, scenes with genuine fear, raw tension, or character vulnerability. But those pieces were removed before anyone outside the set could witness them. In some cases, footage didn't just get cut, it was reportedly destroyed to ensure it could never resurface. These lost scenes represent an alternate version of the show, one that leaned closer to psychological adventure than lighthearted sci-fi. Fans saw the polished final product, but the cast remembered a darker, richer story that almost existed and then vanished. 12. The mid-series shift that changed the show's direction and surprised the cast. As Lost in Space entered its later seasons, a noticeable shift took place, one that many cast members didn't see coming. The early episodes carried a sense of survival and danger, but mid-series, the tone drifted sharply toward lighter, almost whimsical storytelling. Scripts that once explored fear, uncertainty, and exploration were replaced with humorous plots, exaggerated villains, and fantastical creatures designed to appeal to younger viewers. This transition wasn't gradual. It felt sudden, leaving some actors confused about the creative intent. Several later admitted they initially believed the show would grow more intense as the characters faced new challenges, not become increasingly playful. Writers, pressured to boost ratings, leaned into comedy and colorful scenarios, hoping to differentiate the show from its sci-fi competitors. While the shift made Lost in Space memorable in its own unique way, it also left a lingering sense of what could have been among those who expected a more serious evolution. 13. The pressure from competing shows and how it pushed Lost in Space into a new identity. During its run, Lost in Space wasn't operating in a vacuum. It was battling against other sci-fi programs that were quickly gaining traction. Networks closely monitored audience trends, and CBS felt increasing pressure as rival shows introduced bolder ideas, sleeker effects, and more mature plots. Instead of leaning into the darker, more suspenseful direction originally planned, CBS took the opposite route. They pushed the writers to emphasize humor, colorful aliens, and episodic adventures that were easier for younger viewers to follow. The goal was simple: stand out by being the fun sci-fi option. But this change caused tension behind the scenes. Some cast members believed the show had the potential to compete on a deeper narrative level, while the network insisted that accessibility mattered more than complexity. The result was a series caught between creative ambition and rating strategy, ultimately reshaping Lost in Space into something very different from its original blueprint. 14. The hidden exhaustion and emotional strain that built up behind the cheerful performances. Behind the bright costumes and upbeat dialogue, the cast of Lost in Space quietly carried an exhaustion that rarely showed on camera. Long shooting days, constant script changes, and the pressure to maintain a perfect family-friendly tone created a demanding environment where rest was scarce. Several actors later mentioned that they often arrived on set already drained, only to push through hours of filming under hot lights and tight schedules. Emotional fatigue built up as well. Scenes had to be performed with enthusiasm, even when morale was low or frustrations were mounting. Because open complaints were discouraged, each actor dealt with stress privately, creating a sense of isolation despite working together daily. What audiences saw were smiles, confidence, and adventure, but off-screen, many were operating on sheer determination. The show's polished look masked a level of weariness that became an unspoken part of the production, shaping how the cast remembered those years. 15. The overlooked safety risks and close calls that never reached the public. While Lost in Space delivered imaginative adventures every week, the environment behind the scenes often involved real hazards that were rarely acknowledged. Sets were built quickly to keep production moving, which meant loose wiring, unstable platforms, and heavy props placed closer to actors than they should have been. Practical effects, sparks, smoke, and mechanical equipment were used frequently, sometimes without full testing beforehand. Cast members later recalled moments when a light fixture fell, a prop malfunctioned, or a piece of scenery shifted unexpectedly, narrowly avoiding injury. These incidents were brushed aside to stay on schedule, creating an atmosphere where everyone learned to stay alert and hope for the best. There were no standardized safety briefings briefings, and stunt coordination was minimal by modern standards. Fans saw thrilling danger on screen, but the cast faced risks far more real, relying on instinct rather than protections that today would be considered mandatory. 16. The forgotten guest stars and surprising behind-the-scenes stories most viewers never heard. Throughout its run, Lost in Space featured a rotating list of guest stars whose contributions often went unnoticed, despite shaping some of the show's most memorable episodes. Many of these actors arrived expecting a straightforward sci-fi role, only to be surprised by the show's unpredictable production style. Some recalled last-minute script rewrites that changed their characters overnight, while others performed scenes with elaborate costumes that were heavy, restrictive, or difficult to breathe in. A few even mentioned that they had little direction, relying on intuition to bring strange alien roles to life. Several guest performers later shared fond but bewildered memories, struggling with oversized props, adapting to sudden tonal shifts, or working through physical discomfort just to keep a scene moving. Their experiences revealed how chaotic and creative the set could be. Viewers remember the Robinsons and the robot, but these overlooked performers added layers of personality the audience rarely recognized. 17. The gap between what fans saw on screen and what the cast actually experienced. To audiences, Lost in Space was a colorful escape filled with adventure, humor, and heartwarming family moments. Yet behind the polished episodes existed a reality that rarely matched the cheerful tone viewers adored. Scenes that looked effortless often required long hours of preparation, multiple retakes, and emotional patience from actors who were exhausted or dealing with personal frustrations. Props that appeared fun and futuristic were sometimes uncomfortable or malfunctioning, forcing performers to hide discomfort behind smiles. Even character relationships, which seemed natural on screen, were shaped by restrictions that limited the cast's ability to explore deeper dynamics. Fans enjoyed a seamless world where danger resolved neatly and the Robinsons stayed united. The cast, however, remembered tight deadlines, creative disagreements, and the challenge of delivering warmth under pressure. This contrast created two parallel versions of the show, the one viewers loved and the one the actors quietly worked through every day. 18. How time changed the cast's perspective and reshaped the show's legacy. As the years passed, the cast of Lost in Space began reflecting on their experiences with a clarity they didn't have during filming. At the time, most were focused on keeping pace with production, meeting expectations, and delivering performances that matched the show's upbeat tone. But decades later, many admitted they viewed the series differently, recognizing both the charm that made it iconic and the struggles that shaped their memories. Some spoke fondly of the creativity, camaraderie, and unexpected humor that emerged on set. Others acknowledged the exhaustion, limitations, and missed opportunities for deeper storytelling. Distance allowed them to appreciate the show's cultural impact while also being honest about the challenges hidden beneath its surface. For fans, Lost in Space remained a nostalgic classic. For the cast, it became a reminder of resilience, adaptability, and the complicated realities behind a beloved piece of television history. 19. The personal cost the cast carried long after the cameras stopped rolling. When Lost in Space ended, the bright sets and familiar characters stayed on screen, but the cast carried something far heavier into their later lives. Many admitted that the demanding schedules, constant pressure, and emotional strain didn't simply fade once filming wrapped. Some felt typecast, struggling to find roles that allowed them to break away from the identities the show had cemented. Others carried lingering frustration over creative limitations or the sense that their full potential was never explored. A few spoke openly about the physical toll, aches, exhaustion, and memories of long days that pushed them past comfort. Even so, there was pride as well. Pride in having contributed to a series that became a cultural landmark. Their experiences were a mix of gratitude and quiet scars, reminders that the magic fans adored often came at a price the audience never saw. 20. The lasting impact of the show and how its hidden truths changed the way fans see it today. Decades after its final episode, Lost in Space remains a beloved classic, remembered for its charm, imagination, and iconic characters. But as more cast members began sharing what truly happened behind the scenes, the series took on a new layer of meaning. Fans who once saw only adventure now view the show with deeper awareness, recognizing the dedication, sacrifice, and resilience that made each episode possible. The revelations don't erase the nostalgia. Instead, they add dimension, showing that the bright universe on screen was built by people overcoming real challenges. Understanding the struggles behind the production allows viewers to appreciate the cast's performances even more. What was once a simple, family-friendly space adventure now stands as a testament to creativity under pressure. These hidden truths don't diminish the show. They reveal the strength behind it, reshaping its legacy for a new generation of fans. In the end, Lost in Space wasn't just a colorful adventure, it was a story shaped by creativity, pressure, and resilience behind the scenes. Knowing what the cast endured adds a new depth to every episode, revealing a show far more complex than it appeared. Now the question remains, can you ever watch it the same way again?